Hello, world. Welcome to Sci-Fi Lab Transmissions. I'm your host, Mitch Schultz. I appreciate you tuning in and joining me on this cosmic journey. Before we get started, I want to thank our partners and collaborators, Unify Studio and Audi, our entire Sci-Fi Lab team, and our amazing community. Thank you for tuning in. So to kick off our current events and R&D section, Event 1, we always like to remind people to tune in weekly, every Thursday at 4:20 Central Time for Sci-Fi Lab Transmissions that will be virtual. And then we'll also be getting together in person beginning in 2026 for in-person Sci-Fi Lab Transmissions in Austin, Texas. So tune in for more of those. Our second event of note is going to be an upcoming virtual conference, The Revolution of Consciousness, Alpha and Omega, with our friends and colleagues, Steve McDonald and Julia Estara. They'll be joining us as part of the Audi team from Australia. And please sign up to kind of keep up to date with any of our other events that are going to be streaming or in person. All right, moving in to our first article this week, part of the change code dynamics. This is from Quanta, Why Everything in the Universe Turns More Complex. So the researchers argue that there's a universal principle for complexity via what they call functional information, which tends to increase over time in minerals, chemicals, life, and even perhaps intelligence. Now, this would extend the idea of evolution beyond biology into kind of a cosmic evolution. Everything changes everywhere all at once. Stop and think about that for just a minute. Everything changes everywhere all at once. So this can be profound and a lot to take in, but I think it has some good insights for how we might want to start viewing the world that we're existing in. Some of the key ideas that they touch on here is that traditional complexity measures focus on randomness and compressibility of sequences. So they build on the notion of functional information. How many different structures can achieve a given function? The fewer there are, the higher the functional information. So they generalize this beyond biology. For example, mineral species on Earth have become more diverse and complex over geological time. So these three implications could be biology is just one instantation of a broader process of evolving complexity. There might actually be an arrow of complexity akin to the arrow of time in thermodynamics. Information may be as fundamental to the cosmos as energy, mass, and charge. Now, I know that might sound a little strange, but if everything is constantly in response to its environment, over time, basic bits of information, down to the Planck length of information, are going to have an impact on us and scale up and down, down and up. So the rises in this complexity they're not always smooth. It doesn't just happen in this kind of nice gradual progression. They can occur in jumps, almost like a phase transition. So when kind of new floors or foundations kind of organize themselves, and thinking about the emergence of eukaryotes or multicellularity, moving through the complexity ladder. Now, one challenge: function is context dependent. So what counts as functional information depends on the environment and the task being done. So that makes testing very hard. How do we measure that? There's also some skepticism about some of these remarks in this research. Some argue this approach is, again, completely untestable in practice, especially in many physical systems, and may stretch the notion of evolution too far from non-living realms. I tend to disagree with that. I think there is a constant evolution and change, but that's just me. Potential applications, we can start looking at this as, from astrobiology. We search for life by looking for signatures of selection or complexity beyond just simple thermodynamics. Complexity in cancer evolution, mineral evolution, etc. So why does all this matter? If valid, if this is the case, the idea reframes our entire understanding of life, not as a bizarre, contingent kind of accident only on Earth, but as part of a larger universal trend toward complexity, at least this forward angle in time. It also invites us to think about information and function as central um, as a physical quantities like energy. So, so what? How do we? The measure of this like functional information again can be hard to compute or verify in many systems. That's okay. They admit that, but I think they're working towards that, which is always the case. How do we keep building complexity into our studies and into our questions? We start to understand or extend biological style selection, function, and adaptation into non quote unquote sentient things, minerals, non living matter. That may be a little controversial or kind of metaphoric for some people, but again, just thinking about our geological structures on this planet, we have amazing captured states of change. And I think we can see those throughout our rock formations. So there does seem to be some ties beyond just the biological change process. The notion of inevitability, that complexity must increase, is also still speculative, although there's a lot of information pointing in that direction. Um, it's not clear if this trend is universal. It has some different pieces that probably get a little glossed over in the article, touching on like mass extinctions or collapses of societies, even populations. But they do a pretty good job of laying out kind of the rationality behind what they're doing. So I guess where I'm coming from with this, at the intersection of kind of consciousness and technology and our human experience, how does complexity emerge? Not just in life, but in systems. Our technology, thinking about from the time we created language, managed fire, and then started creating simple tools all the way to our highly interactive and informational systems that we're existing in today. Um, so the challenge is, are we shaping complexity that is functional in the sense of meaningful, novel, adaptive, or simply chaotic and bloated with information? So it doesn't offer a bulletproof law of increasing complexity, but it prevents provocative framework for thinking about complexity beyond life, and maybe even baked in to the universal playbook. Okay, Article 2 from Episode 01. Vertical particles, how physicists' clever bookkeeping trick could underlie reality. This was originally published in The Conversation. The article kind of explores the concept of virtual particles, entities in quantum physics that pop in and out of existence according to the math, and ask whether these bookkeeping tools might tell us something deep about the nature of reality. Virtual particles are used as a kind of a computational device when two real, quote unquote, real particles interact, say two electrons repelling each other. Physicists often imagine an exchange of vertical particles, photons, gluons, etc., to model what this force is. These virtual particles are not directly observable. They don't meet the usual criteria for kind of real particles that you can detect them independently, or that you cannot detect independently, excuse me. The name itself says it, virtual. So yet, the predictions made using them via quantum field theory and Feynman diagrams are astoundingly accurate. So, for example, in calculating how electrons move or how forces behave, sometimes to 12 decimal places. Now, this is astonishing. One way to think of them, I guess, is instead of trying to compute a force across empty space directly, physicists invoke the notion that The fuzziness of a quantum vacuum allows short-lived particle pairs, virtual particles, to borrow energy briefly, mediate an interaction, and then vanish, as long as they obey quantum uncertainty constraints. Um, so specific phenomena of this, the Kashmir effect, two metal plates in a vacuum attracting attracting due to vacuum fluctuations, can be calculated using virtual particle math. The theory of Hawking radiation, so black hole evaporation via pairs of virtual particles at the event horizon, also uses the same idea. The big philosophical question here, because virtual particles are indispensable from giving the right answers, they cannot be directly observed. Are they just math tools, or do they have some kind of reality? The article suggests the debate is always open. So again, looking at it from my perspective and from the consciousness, technology, and human experience lens, I guess this shows how our best models of reality rely on things we cannot directly perceive. And so, what does that tell us? If we say this is reality, but we can't see it, I think it leaves a lot of things open. They shape our behavior of matter at the very fundamental level. So, it invites us to reflect on what is real. What does that mean, real? Um, so, thinking of the future and then in design, if our physical world uses virtual entities as part of its code, right? The on and off switch or exchange of information, then when we're building technologies, quantum systems or simulations, immersive realities, we're often working with layers of reality that are book kept rather than seen. Information outside slash embedded inside the system. The paradox is there for all of us to chew on. It underlines a theme. The interface of perception plus the model plus reality is ever more complex. Just because we can't see something doesn't mean it isn't part of the workings of reality. And our conceptual tools basically shape the way that what we call real. The article is clear, though, that virtual particles are a modeling convention, not something that we can isolate and measure in the same way of real particles. So being cautious about what they are, how they are, and what role they're playing, we must be a little cautious in our approach. At the same time, it seems to open up a lot of questions. There are other theoretical frameworks out there that do not explicitly rely on virtual particle picture. So some physicists treat this concept as kind of a provision or just a convenience. The philosophical question, are vertical particles real, remains unresolved, of course. Physics can compute them through particular frameworks, but whether they have ontological status, we still just don't know. Once upon a time in our near future, a coded message communicates with every human, regardless of culture, geography, language, or evolutionary story. An alien yet familiar tale, exploring the change code dynamics in the physical and the quantum world. What is the universal pattern of change within its many complex systems, all the way to human paradigms? There's this ubiquitous experience of transformation forever and ever and ever. So, what is this great arc of becoming? Who are we becoming? How do we experience the wholeness of existence through our mind, our body, and our spirit? The world is that kind of a single dynamic organism with its own collective mind. It's a holistic and kind of intuitive way of being. How do we start to recognize the fractal patterns of our emergence and their different densities as we move along? What is our deep history? What does our deep history tell us in our mythologies? What are these mythologies of falls and then a rise? There's an alpha and omega kind of pulse, or a yin and a yang, pulling and pushing constantly. Boom, boom. It's the breath. It's becoming a living pulse of divine potential, all the way down to our heroes' journeys, these spirals through our consciousness, to our solar system, to the universe. So this ancient rhythm of becoming, reawakening, consciousness spiraling outward and upward. Technology is no longer external. It's interactive with our fields all around us. And the human light body is remembering its purpose. Thank you for tuning in. This has been episode 01, and we look forward to seeing you next week. But let's get back to the basics. Some things we can all agree, or may. We dream of travels throughout the universe is not the universe within us. We do not know the depths of our spirit. The mysterious path leads within. In us or nowhere lies eternity with its worlds, the past, and the future. As an individual, you were born, bang, are alive now, will die, puff. Our lives are like the wind or like sounds. We come into being, resonate with each other, then fade away. So existing in the material world, you require self. You are you, right? That's where it all begins and ends. You need perception to interact with your surroundings and read this page, of course, and energy to keep the body and mind going. Of course, all this is an oversimplification for simplification purposes. At any given moment, there is always yourself in the driver's seat. The unanswerable question, why you are you? It does not mean that it's just about you. You are a unique, conscious body, personality, individual experiencing life. Your unique fears, your unique desires, how you perceive, how you think, what you expect. Your name is a mind blow from which you will never recover. What is the soul's form? Not everything is matter or energy. There are fields: gravity, love, electrical, solar, entheons, morphic. You are not a machine. You are an ever-changing, the real shapeshifter, wonder of the organic cosmic dust, matter, energy, and fields. No machine will ever be able to replicate simultaneous, diverse, and complex operations occurring in your body at any given moment. Energy for the body and the mind. Energy for the body and the soul, the whole soul. Atoms, molecules, proteins, hormones, synapses, fibers, plasma, acid. Your body does not sleep. Nothing is lost, nothing is created, everything is transformed. Body mass matters. 30 trillion cells, 60 billion neurons, 600 to 840 muscles, 206 bones, 78 organs, system overlay, circulatory, cardiovascular, digestive, endocrine, endocannabinol, exocrine, integumentary, immune, lymphatic, muscular, nervous, reproductive, skeletal, urinary. You are more than dust matter. 1 + 1 = Y. Theseus is always Theseus. The human body is made of roughly 30 trillion cells. Most of them will be replaced every 7 to 10 years. The ship of Theseus is a metaphor, and it speaks to that ship that requires constant maintenance. After some time, all its components have been replaced. Is it still the same ship? Absolute reality is unattainable, imperceptible. Senses, spatial sensors. Our senses allow us to perceive and interact with the world. We sense the weather, the light, and the ground we walk upon. We grab, slide, and weave through an immensely complex yet amazingly effective orchestra of sensors and knowledge accumulation. However, our limited sensitivity prevents us from experiencing reality to the full. Limited range and scope. Close to far away, we have sight, hearing, smell, touch, taste. While light and sound seem easy to measure on a spectrum, the rest of the senses pose a serious challenge to our notion of scope and range. However, it would be difficult to assume that we could perceive all existing smells, textures, and flavors. One rule to rule them all: the senses. Input, signal; translation, conversation; transmission, transport; apprehension, perceived or interpreted. Your version of reality is 1 in 7 billion, more or less if you only account for human animals.